6 ways to identify a stupid man. Have you ever wondered why some people seem stuck in the same cycles, never quite breaking free to reach their full potential? The answer often lies in something subtle yet profound: the inability to recognize patterns of behavior that hinder growth. It's not always about talent, resources, or even luck. It's about self-awareness. Think about it. How often do we repeat mistakes simply because we refuse to acknowledge them? The great philosopher Socrates once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Without self-reflection, we remain blind to the habits, reactions, and beliefs that keep us from evolving. A lack of self-awareness is like driving with a fogged-up windshield. You might be moving forward, but you have no real clarity on where you're going or what obstacles you're about to crash into. One of the biggest roadblocks to self-awareness is the inability to recognize flaws. It's human nature to protect our ego, to resist admitting our faults because doing so feels like an attack on our identity. But real growth begins the moment we stop defending our imperfections and start understanding them. Carl Jung put it best: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. If we never take the time to recognize our flaws, we risk living on autopilot, reacting in the same ways, making the same mistakes, and wondering why nothing ever changes. This ties directly into how we handle criticism. When someone points out a mistake, do we listen, or do we immediately get defensive? Defensiveness is often a knee-jerk reaction to protect ourselves from discomfort. It's the mind's way of saying, "I don't want to feel wrong." But in reality, avoiding criticism doesn't protect us, it limits us. Think of feedback as a mirror. It shows us what we might not see on our own. The more we resist it, the less we grow. So how do we apply this in daily life? Start small. Develop the habit of questioning yourself, not in a self-doubting way, but in a curious, growth-oriented way. When you receive criticism, pause before reacting. Ask yourself, is there truth in this? Instead of rejecting it outright, try to see it as an opportunity. Keep a journal and reflect on moments when you felt defensive. What triggered it? What lesson was hidden in that discomfort? Self-awareness isn't about harsh self-judgment. It's about seeing yourself clearly, flaws and all, and using that knowledge to become better. The people who grow the most aren't the ones who never fail, but the ones who refuse to let their blind spots control them. Have you ever made a decision in the heat of the moment, only to regret it later? Maybe it was sending a text you shouldn't have, quitting something out of frustration, or making a purchase that seemed like a great idea, until reality set in. Impulsive decision-making is one of the biggest obstacles to personal growth because it often prioritizes short-term relief over long-term success. We like to think we're rational beings, but the truth is emotions drive a significant portion of our choices. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio once said, "We are not thinking machines that feel. We are feeling machines that think." While emotions provide valuable insights, relying solely on them can lead to reckless actions. Acting on anger, excitement, or fear without stepping back to think can result in choices that feel good in the moment, but create unnecessary problems down the line. Consider the difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is immediate, fueled by emotions. Responding, on the other hand, involves a pause, a moment to assess the situation with logic and perspective. This pause is where self-control lies, and it's what separates impulsive choices from wise decisions. Another common pitfall of impulsive decision-making is ignoring long-term consequences. We live in a world that encourages instant gratification, one-click purchases, quick-fix solutions, and immediate validation. But real growth requires thinking beyond the present moment. As Warren Buffett wisely put it, chains of habit are too light to be felt until they are too heavy to be broken. Small, impulsive choices can build up over time, leading to patterns that are difficult to escape. So how can we avoid the trap of impulsive decision-making? First, practice delaying big decisions, especially when emotions are high. If something feels urgent, ask yourself, will this still feel like the right choice in a week, a month, a year? Journaling or talking to a trusted friend can also help bring clarity. Another powerful technique is the October 10th 10 rule. How will this decision affect me in 10 minutes? 10 months? 10 years? Training yourself to think long-term doesn't mean ignoring your emotions. It means integrating them with logic. The strongest decisions come from a balance between heart and mind. The more we learn to slow down, step back, and evaluate the bigger picture, the more we set ourselves up for choices that truly support our growth. Why do some people repeat the same mistakes, while others seem to turn every setback into a stepping stone? The difference isn't luck or intelligence. It's the willingness to learn. Mistakes are inevitable, but failing to learn from them is a choice. Growth isn't about avoiding failure. It's about how we respond to it. One of the biggest barriers to learning from mistakes is the tendency to blame others. When something goes wrong, it's easier to point fingers than to look in a mirror. But as psychologist Carol Dweck, known for her work on mindset, says, becoming is better than being. Personal growth requires owning our missteps, not justifying them. Every time we shift responsibility, we rob ourselves of the chance to improve. Blaming others might feel like self-protection, but in reality, it keeps us stuck. It reinforces the belief that we are powerless over our circumstances. The truth is, while we can't always control what happens, we can always control how we respond. The most successful people aren't the ones who never fail. They're the ones who take full ownership of their failures and use them as lessons. Equally damaging is resistance to self-improvement. Some people treat mistakes as final verdicts instead of opportunities to grow. This often stems from a fixed mindset, the belief that our abilities and intelligence are set in stone. But as Albert Einstein famously said, once you stop learning, you start dying. Growth requires curiosity, humility, and the willingness to challenge ourselves. So how do we break these patterns? First, when something goes wrong, resist the urge to deflect blame. Instead, ask, what was my role in this? What can I learn? Keeping a mistake journal can be a powerful tool. Writing down what happened, what you felt, and what you'll do differently next time turns failures into lessons. Another key step is developing a learning mindset. Instead of seeing mistakes as proof of inadequacy, see them as part of the process. The most successful people treat failure as feedback. They analyze what went wrong, adjust their approach, and keep going. At the end of the day, the ability to learn from mistakes is what separates those who grow from those who remain stuck. The past is only a prison if we refuse to learn from it. When we stop blaming, start owning, and commit to constant self-improvement, every mistake becomes a stepping stone to something greater. Why do we crave certainty so much? Why do we feel uneasy when faced with questions that don't have clear answers? Life is full of ambiguity, yet many people struggle with it, clinging to black and white thinking as a way to feel in control. The irony is that this need for certainty often limits personal growth. Real wisdom doesn't come from having all the answers. It comes from learning to navigate the gray areas. At its core, black and white thinking is an attempt to simplify a complex world. It's comforting to believe things are either good or bad, right or wrong, success or failure. But as philosopher Bertrand Russell pointed out, the whole problem with the world is that fools and fanatics are always so certain of themselves, and wiser people so full of doubts. The ability to hold multiple perspectives, to consider different angles, is a sign of deep thinking and adaptability. The problem with rigid, either-or thinking is that it blocks critical thinking. It leads to snap judgments and prevents us from seeing alternative solutions. A person who insists on viewing things in absolutes may struggle in relationships, careers, or decision-making because they can't process complexity. This is why true intelligence isn't about knowing everything. It's about knowing how to think through uncertainty. Another challenge is discomfort with nuanced situations. Some people become defensive, even hostile, when confronted with gray areas because uncertainty feels threatening. They want a clear villain or hero, a definite solution, a perfect answer. But life doesn't work that way. As F. Scott Fitzgerald put it, The test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. Learning to sit with ambiguity without rushing to categorize it builds mental resilience. So how can we become more comfortable with uncertainty? Start by questioning absolutes. When you catch yourself thinking in extremes, "This always happens," or "That person is completely wrong," pause and ask, "Is there another perspective?" Reading widely, engaging in discussions with people who challenge your views, and practicing open-mindedness can also help. Another strategy is to reframe uncertainty as an opportunity. Instead of fearing the unknown, see it as a chance to learn. The most adaptable people aren't the ones who have everything figured out. They're the ones who are willing to explore, question, and evolve. The ability to handle ambiguity isn't just a skill. It's a superpower in a world that is anything but black and white. What if the biggest obstacle to your success isn't a lack of talent or opportunity, but simply a failure to think long-term? In a world that thrives on instant gratification, it's easy to prioritize what feels good now over what's truly beneficial in the future. But growth requires a shift in mindset, from chasing quick wins to building something that lasts. One of the most common traps is sacrificing future benefits for immediate gains. We see this everywhere: spending money impulsively instead of saving, choosing comfort over discipline, or making decisions that feel good in the moment but create long-term problems. As Warren Buffett put it, someone's sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago. Sustainable success isn't built overnight. It's the result of consistent, intentional choices. This short-term focus can also affect relationships, health, and reputation. Consider how easy it is to neglect deep connections in favor of superficial interactions, or how momentary indulgences, whether in food, habits, or behavior, can lead to long-term consequences. When we make decisions based solely on what feels good now, we risk waking up one day wondering why things didn't turn out the way we hoped. A lack of big-picture thinking is another major barrier to growth. People who struggle with long-term vision often find themselves making the same mistakes, stuck in cycles of short-term thinking. They focus on immediate outcomes rather than asking, "How will this decision affect me in 5 years?" As psychologist Daniel Kahneman explains in Thinking, Fast and Slow, human nature is wired for short-term rewards, but those who train themselves to think long-term gain a massive advantage. So how can we develop a long-term mindset? First, practice delaying gratification. Before making a decision, ask, "Is this choice serving my future self or just my present self?" Visualization is another powerful tool. Imagine where you want to be in 5 or 10 years, then align your daily actions with that vision. Journaling, goal setting, and surrounding yourself with people who think long-term can also help. Ultimately, the most successful people aren't the ones who chase quick wins, but those who play the long game. They understand that real growth requires patience, discipline, and a willingness to trade momentary pleasure for lasting fulfillment. The future belongs to those who are willing to invest in it today. Have you ever found yourself nodding along in a conversation, pretending to understand something just to avoid looking uninformed? Most of us have. But here's the paradox. The smartest people aren't the ones who claim to know everything. They're the ones who openly admit when they don't. Growth isn't about having all the answers. It's about being willing to ask better questions. One of the biggest roadblocks to learning is the urge to pretend we already know. This need to appear knowledgeable, even in areas where we have little experience, isn't just about ego. It's often about self-preservation. We fear looking incompetent, so we cover it up. But as Socrates famously said, the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. The people who evolve the most are the ones who are comfortable saying, "I don't know. Can you explain?" The problem with pretending to know everything is that it shuts down curiosity. When we act like experts in unfamiliar areas, we miss opportunities to learn from those who actually are experts. It also makes us less credible. People respect honesty more than false confidence, and nothing is more obvious than someone bluffing their way through a topic. True intelligence isn't about protecting an image. It's about seeking truth, even when it exposes our gaps. At the core of this reluctance to admit ignorance is the fear of vulnerability. Acknowledging what we don't know can feel uncomfortable, as if it exposes a weakness. But in reality, vulnerability is a strength. Brené Brown, a researcher on courage and authenticity, says vulnerability is not winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up when you can't control the outcome. When we admit our knowledge gaps, we create space for learning, connection, and growth. So how do we overcome this fear? First, embrace the power of "I don't know." Instead of feeling pressure to have all the answers, start seeing gaps in knowledge as opportunities. Ask questions, seek guidance, and surround yourself with people who challenge you. Another powerful practice is developing a beginner's mindset, approaching every situation with the curiosity of someone eager to learn, rather than the pride of someone needing to prove themselves. At the end of the day, the people who grow the most aren't those who pretend to have it all figured out. They're the ones who stay open, curious, and humble enough to keep learning. The moment we stop fearing ignorance is the moment we start overcoming it. What's the real difference between ignorance and stupidity? At first glance, they might seem similar. Both involve a lack of knowledge. But in reality, they're worlds apart. Ignorance is simply not knowing, a temporary state that can be fixed with education, curiosity, and effort. Stupidity, on the other hand, is choosing not to know. It's the refusal to learn, the resistance to growth, and the belief that no improvement is necessary. Ignorance is a solvable issue. No one is born knowing everything, and gaps in knowledge are natural. The only question is whether we're willing to close them. As Mark Twain put it, we are all ignorant, just on different subjects. The most intelligent people recognize their ignorance and take steps to address it through reading, listening, questioning, and being open to new perspectives. The moment you acknowledge what you don't know, you're already on the path to learning. Stupidity, however, is a deeper problem. It's not about lacking knowledge. It's about rejecting it. It's the refusal to challenge assumptions, the insistence on being right even when evidence suggests otherwise. As philosopher Karl Popper noted, true ignorance is not the absence of knowledge, but the refusal to acquire it. Stupidity thrives in arrogance and defensiveness. It's what happens when people cling to their beliefs, not because they're true, but because they're comfortable. The difference between ignorance and stupidity determines whether we grow or remain stagnant. An ignorant person who is willing to learn will evolve, adapt, and improve. A stubborn person who refuses to learn will stay trapped in the same patterns, repeating mistakes and blaming others. Growth requires humility, the ability to say, "I was wrong, and now I know better." So how do we make sure we're on the right side of this divide? It starts with self-awareness. Are we open to feedback, or do we dismiss it? Do we seek knowledge, or do we assume we already have enough? The key is curiosity, treating life as a constant learning process rather than a test of how much we already know. Intelligence isn't about knowing everything. It's about staying open, adaptable, and willing to learn. Ignorance is temporary, but stupidity is a choice. And the choice is always ours. As the Japanese saying goes, "A fool learns from experience. A wise person learns from history."